So I've just got back from seeing The Creator in the cinema. So let's, first of all, before I start the review, let's talk about the director, Gareth Edwards. So Gareth launched into the scene with a low-budget science fiction film called Monsters in 2010, which he also wrote. And I thought it was a good film. It's a debut feature film. It's pretty good. It's got a real atmosphere. It's compelling. Yeah, I thought it was a good film. And I thought, well, I'm gonna look out for this guy. He could be one to watch. From then, he got offered the Godzilla script, which is a remake of a remake of a remake of the classic Japanese Godzilla films. And with this film, again, nice visuals, brooding atmosphere, but lacking in the excitement department greatly. Look, I think it's not easy making a Godzilla film. I just think the fundamental problem with Godzilla as a creature, or a character if you like, is it's so massive that it's not like a dinosaur chasing you, like, in Jurassic Park, like T-Rex chasing you. This is the size of, like, a 50-story building. So really, and it's bulletproof and missile proof. So really, the only thing that can take on Godzilla, really, to make a relatively interesting film is another big creature, which is what they ended up doing with the sequel later on. But not to digress, yeah, lacking in the excitement department. But the combination of these two films, Monsters and Godzilla, gave Gareth the chance to direct a Star Wars film for Disney. And that film was Rogue One. Rogue One, for me, is easily the best Star Wars film that Disney have made. And I think that's widely accepted with many Star Wars fans. I went to the cinema to see it, and although I was kind of not really that engaged for the first 2/3 of the film, the last third of the film was really good. I mean, it was really, really good. And fun if you like Star Wars. Since then, I've watched the film 3 or 4 times, and actually it does actually get better with age. It's actually a really good Star Wars film. But apparently on Gareth's first cut, there were issues. Disney were not certain about it. It was too dark, it was too brooding, it had great visuals, which is obviously one of the traits for a Gareth Edwards film. But something was not right with it. It was lacking excitement, it was too dark. So in actual fact, Tony Gilroy, another director and writer, was brought on to actually dissemble the last third of Gareth Edwards' film and actually bolt on a completely new finale to the film. Gareth still got director credit for it, and Tony Gilroy didn't go down as director, but it's well known by people in the business that Tony Gilroy actually had to take over the reins of it and save it to a certain extent. And he did a great job with it. So the film is kind of like a hybrid between Gareth Edwards and Tony Gilroy. But Disney were pleased enough with the box office take on that film that they rewarded Gareth with a chance to make another film, and it looks like in the last 7 years since Rogue One, because he hasn't made anything else, he was developing The Creator. So let's get on to the review. Let's talk about the positives first. Well, the set design, the art direction, the cinematography, the lighting, the acting, the casting, and the opening 10 minutes are all fantastic. They're really, really, really good. You can see all the good filmmaking style and mood Gareth learned from Monsters, Godzilla and Rogue One. It looks really great, and the effects are really, really great. And for a modest budget of 80 million, it looks way more expensive than that. So they're the positives. So let's go on to the negatives. The script and concept. Yeah, huge problems with the script and concept for me. So let's look at the writers. So the writers on this film were Gareth Edwards, who I don't know if he came up with a concept for this or not, or it was the co-writer he worked with, which is Chris White. Now, he worked with Chris White on Rogue One, and I would imagine he probably thought, I really like working with you, let's do another science fiction, I've got this concept, help me write it. And as I said, Gareth has actually solely written a film called Monsters, which I thought was good. So they dived into this together. So let's have a look at Chris's CV. Well, according to IMDb, he's mainly adapted screenplays from books about a boy, Pinocchio, and the Golden Compass. Now, you've got to remember, when you're adapting a screenplay, most of the legwork's been done by the previous writer, right? The concept's been worked out, the characters have pretty much been worked out, and you're just adapting that so it can be turned into a film. You can win an Oscar for doing that, and you can be nominated for an Oscar for doing that, but for me, it's not like writing an original screenplay. You're standing on the shoulders of giants, in my opinion. And you only have to look at About a Boy, Pinocchio and the Golden Compass. I'm sure Chris himself would admit they're better writers than him, and I'm sure he'd agree with that statement. So let's have a look at some of his original screenplays. Well, Rogue One, you could argue is an original screenplay, but it isn't really, because it's actually from a concept from John Knoll years earlier. He always thought, wouldn't it be great to do a film about the rebels that actually stole the Death Star plans that obviously they utilise in Star Wars. So that is a brilliant, brilliant idea for a film. So neither Gareth or Chris came up with that concept, but he did come up with the rest of the script with Gareth and also with Tony Gilroy, as I explained earlier. So the other script of note that Chris has done is Nutty Professor 2, The Clumps. Now, even that is not an original concept, because Nutty Professor 2 obviously is a sequel to The Nutty Professor. The Nutty Professor was a remake of the 1963 original, starring Jerry Lewis. So the lead character is set up and the lead concept is set up, and the clumps were set up in Nutty Professor 1. So again, he's not really originating anything, but he did write the story and the scenes. So can you start to see what I'm getting at here? Chris hasn't really originated anything of note from the concept stage until this film, The Creator, with Gareth. Now, if you're going to go and take on science fiction about AI, you're going into battle with some of the greatest films ever made. 2001 and Bladerunner, for example. So let's compare the writers of those films with Gareth and Chris. For 2001, Stanley Kubrick worked with Arthur C. Clarke, a writer who only wrote science fiction and was already widely regarded after his work on Child's End and The Sentinel, Sentinel eventually becoming 2001. Ridley Scott turned to acclaimed novelist Philip K. Dick, arguably the greatest science fiction writer of all time. Gareth turned to the writer of this scene. It's like Ridley Scott turned to the writer of Spaceballs to help him make a science fiction film.
Oh no, not again.
So we're in different leagues here immediately, and it shows, I'm afraid. On surface level, some viewers might think it's powerful and deep, but when you stop and take a second to think about the film, and if you love science fiction, you will quickly come to the conclusion the writing and concept of this film is ill thought out. It's simply not good enough. It struck me after 30 minutes, so let's talk about a few of the many issues with the concept and writing. You are asked by the film to accept that AI is totally an innocent and wonderful thing that only wants to help mankind. And it's the humans who are unreasonable and the real enemy. And you might say, well, that's interesting to me, and that could end up being true. We just don't know. But if you're going to set up that stance, there has to be a good counter-argument as to why this might not be true. So at least you can go through the movie not certain who you should be siding with. That would be interesting, but the script drops the ball within 20 minutes of the film by admitting the nuclear bomb that killed millions of people in LA was not done by AI. It was actually done by human error. And this is the whole point of everything you watch from then on. This is the premise of the film. There was a nuclear bomb that went off in LA and killed millions of people, and AI was blamed for the mistake, right? So you go, oh, I get it. So now they want to wipe out AI. AI is the enemy of mankind because they dropped a nuclear bomb. So let's destroy all AI. Except after 20 minutes, the film informs you that it was a human error and it was nothing to do with AI. So there's no reason at all to have any sympathy with the antagonists in this film. And the best written films, books, plays develop an antagonist that challenges you. This doesn't happen here. So the tension has gone for the rest of the film. You are then asked to accept that AI, in approximately 40 years, which is where the film is set, that AI can eat human food, enjoy it. It can cry real tears. But there's no explanation of how this was possible, or why AI would even think that this was necessary. If it was because they wanted to appear thoroughly human to other real humans, then why were they designed with a big hole in their heads? It just doesn't make sense. And the other major problem is the lack of understanding of AI by the writers, and whether or not AI could possibly go sentient in the future. This is such a complicated subject matter that the film chooses not to really explore at all. We won't get into that because we don't really know, and we haven't actually got a solution for it, and let's just ignore it. And that's a fundamental flaw with the film. we're asked to think that maybe Alfie is sentient because she cries, and also asked if she will go to heaven when she dies. That's it. That's all we get. Now, I don't want to get into some big monologue about the subject matter, but briefly, we're into Ghost in the Machine territory here. That is, if you believe in the spirit or the soul, is it possible that a soul could enter an AI robot so it becomes sentient? This is different from a robot becoming sentient on its own. This, in my opinion, is not possible and will never be possible. I do believe that AI will do a brilliant impression of a robot that is sentient, but it actually will never develop a soul. Because think about it, if it becomes sentient, it's developing a soul. Therefore, it's becoming God. And that can't happen. Now, just those few sentences that I've just said is way more interesting than anything you'll see in this film. Everything is just not thought out thoroughly in this film, and for science fiction, it has to be. These are just 3 examples of what comes to mind as I do this review. There are many, many more examples, but it'll end up being an hour long, this review. And to be honest, I'm not prepared to go through the effort of highlighting all the flaws if the writers of the movie themselves can't be bothered to address them. Both Gareth and Chris are totally out of their depth here, making original science fiction, I'm sad to say. He's obviously been developing this since Rogue One, and he's been ordered by Disney with 80mm to go and play, but yet again, no one at Disney thought to read the script and highlight the issues in the script to try and improve it. And to be honest, it's really frustrating, as there actually are some nuggets of ideas in this film that, if expanded, could have actually made a better film than the film we ended up with. The supposedly emotional bonding between Joshua and Alfie doesn't hit home. And this is the whole point of the film. It's can this human, who is anti-AI, bond with this AI child? That's the whole thing, leading up to this emotional ending, which, for me, had no emotion whatsoever. Because no rules were set in place. I didn't care about any of these characters. I didn't really understand the AI. I didn't understand if the AI were actually sentient, or they thought they were sentient, or they were pretending to be sentient. And maybe that's deliberate. Maybe they wanted the audience to decide for themselves. But that's just lazy writing. Lazy writing. No, if you want to have a bit of emotion about artificial intelligence, then just watch the last scene of Blade Runner with Rutger Hauer. The Tears in Rain monologue. There's way more emotion in that scene than this entire movie. This might not be true, but it feels like it's like a dumbed down cash grab to jump on the AI debate that's going off at the moment, but without bringing a coherent, solid argument to the party. So, what's my review? Well, if you've not watched any of my reviews yet, how I review is I've got A, B, C and D. And I'm afraid, I had to go to the cinema to this. I had to pay for it. And yet again, and this is the 3rd review that I've done, that I'm angry that I've paid money to see this. Times are hard for many, many people. And it's a big splash out for people and families to go and see movies. And for me, this is a wait to see it for free again. Or if it comes on your streaming service that you're paying for, then watch it by all means when it comes on there. And you'll be diverted by it. And as I said, the visuals are great, but I don't think it's worth paying for. It's not worth the price of a cinema ticket. So that's my review. Stay tuned for more reviews. Hopefully one might come along which actually gets a positive review. You never know. Thanks for listening to The Only Review That Matters.